Alright, hi guys. I wanted to give you all an update on what's changing, what's coming up, and what are my plans for the near future for AstralSorcery's updates. So, as I've released a 1.11 version now, I will, since those two versions are kind of still close together and not much difference, I will for the next time support both versions. So 1.11 and 1.10 will both get feature and bug fix updates, both with the same, and we'll try to keep them as consistent as possible. So yeah, I'm not thinking about adding integration for combat layer or anything, because for one, I want to still make AstralSorcery a standalone mod, and for the second, again, I would like, which goes along with the first, I would not want to make it depend on any library or anything else of the sort. So that covers that. Then, as a few of you knew, I was and am building upon the next tier, tier 4, which would introduce a lot of new things, such as, of course, the 4th level of altar, and a new set of constellations, which I don't know if I have here. Yes, I do. Which would be the next lower tier, quote-unquote lower tier, of constellations. So we have the major ones marked as bright, we have the weak ones marked as dim, and we have then the faint ones, which are referenced code-wise as minor constellations. So those all, as well as some other things, go along with tier 4. So, however, as I've gathered from multiple servers and stuff's now feedback, I get the general sense that progression is too heavily gated and too, well, just in general undesirable or not rewarding, and just taking too long, which I can see. Since essentially, so tier 1 would require you finding a structure, tier 2 would require you finding a suitable base place, essentially along, like, together with the light well, getting liquid starlight, finding a suitable place to even craft this thing. And well, at this point, basically only the crystal tools and the nuisance that is the hand telescope. Then after that, it will literally require the player to build this obnoxious thing, which does require a decent amount of resources and whatnot. And that is required for the next tier. So this is heavily gating the progression through here. Well, of course, again, like along with the player attunement, the perks and tools that I've added last update, as well as the player requiring to do basic infusion and like with throwing a bunch of stuff into liquid starlight. And well, it's not technically required, however, you will need it later on, so it's kind of required, yes. Which is either you always make it consume one aquamarine by throwing it just into liquid starlight, or building yet another structure for the chance of for a pretty good chance of it not consuming any, but requiring 12 to just build this thing. This now also has ruined marble in the central areas to avoid confusion, which blocks are placed here. And of course, the telescope that got changed. gated behind you at successfully attuning yourself to constellation, which was kind of contradictory in what the player actually wants in the playthrough and what he would like to get. Since the hand telescope is by any means completely not intended to be used for discovering multiple constellations, or that was not like my initial goal for it, thus it was not designed for it. It was mainly meant so you find a constellation and then attune yourself to that, and later on revert the attunement, and like having seen a broader spectrum of constellations, then choose the constellations you mainly want to in the end go with. This is contradictory, oddly enough. Well, yeah, no surprise there, I guess. So I guess this is where my initial design then failed, because I adjusted another part of it and then stuff got weird. So that changed. So now the telescope is essentially free to craft. So then you can easily select the tune you want to go for. The telescope will not show weak ones. Yeah, telescope will not show weak constellations, only major constellations. If you are not attuned, once you are attuned, you will get to see major and weak ones. So yeah, this takes forever to progress through, essentially making the player too focused just on progression and neglecting the actual interesting parts here, or just not making them viable or too late, or there's too much required to even get to this point. And then the next tier, which is, well, at the moment, the last tier, which would then actually make the ritual pedestal and most of the other things, such as the tree beacon and liquefied like light well and that stuff, actually viable, is at this point already very, very late. As well as block transmutation, which is do I have here? Yes. Which is a bunch of other quote unquote garbage, I guess. So that's essentially just too late in the progression curve. So what I'm planning for the near future is, instead of adding tier 4, or I'm gonna put my plans for tier 4 on a halt, I will to make this step kind of redundant. Like, essentially you have then at this point two options. You can either go with the Skywave Resonator and search for a viable spot, or, which I tried to and utilize the chunk borders for to visualize this. I kind of want to go for, let's say, a very basic wooden structure. Let me pick some flour for this to get rid of that. Essentially some sort of wooden, like, base-ish structure with a glass lens on top of it. The glass lens looked obnoxious, so I got rid of it here. That's the basic, like, design for this block or whatever. It is supposed to be very cheap. It is supposed to grant a focal point of starlight, I would say. Which, if you then place your altar close to it, would essentially give it like a bit of starlight, which will be enough for tier 1, barely enough for tier 2, and tier 3 onwards, this will no longer be like a real solution for your starlight E needs. It is essentially a solution to get rid of early game running around with your Skywave Resonator. since apparently finding a place that is very suitable, well, this is biased, of course, because it's super flat and it's super easy to eventually see places where it is suitable. There we also already go. Since apparently finding such places here, which is, well, consider a forest, this is obnoxious to find, yes. And I can see that. So I will get rid of this step most likely, or provide the, which I cannot find anymore, alternative, because I forgot the way back. So there's that. There will be an alternative here. Then I want to move most of the tier 3 things in terms of networking and that kind of stuff, as well as star metal, into tier 2. I will make the tier 3 altar depend on star metal, and I will try to disconnect the progression line from attunement. So attunement gets optional and progression can be done much faster. That way I try to offer a much broader spectrum of the content of the mod a bit more easily, because not everyone, like, the essential attunement itself is very, very restrictive from a gameplay point of view, since deciding for an attunement has a very high weight in gameplay, since, well, you only have 4 major constellations, and you kind of want to get one very specific one, since you want movement or offensive things or growth related things, which I still try to balance out evenly, with more or less success. So this turned out to be more of a gameplay gating aspect than I would have originally imagined. So I'm disconnecting this and will make this require star metal instead. So you do no longer require here the attuned crystal. Then I want to lay the focus much more on the fact that the Starlight network is not only here to produce star metal or do block transmutation. It is mainly intended to, like, let's say you're doing a bunch of things with AstralSorcery, like in the mod, right? It was mainly intended to accelerate the whole pace of the mod and the things you've done so far. I'm just trying to find a tank here. Thank you. So the way it currently is not obvious, and this doesn't actually pull out of here. Oh, it does. So I will need some light. So the light will thus give off light depending on the liquid in it, which was suggested by Seraph. However, generally the idea of the Starlight network is everything that required light or any connection to the sky in the mod would generally anything that works with the sky is essentially like, hey, this block needs starlight, so it collects it by itself. Which is, if every item or block does that, it is for everything kind of inefficient and slow, and again, you need to have it like face the sky directly, otherwise you will get nothing, and so on and so forth. That is very limiting, and wall limits therefore base design very heavily. So the intention of the Starlight network originally was to, instead of having each machine or block or whatever collect its starlight by itself, have a focused beam of light of that starlight. So essentially, instead of let's say here the light wall collecting light at its spot very inefficiently, have a starlight network coming from wherever essentially, and it linking onto or shining directly, focusing its beam directly onto the light wall, resulting into, as you can see in comparison to before, much more starlight. Rub that beam. And as you can see, it's just generating so small amounts that it's not even actually not even gaining anything. Well, now it's gaining 1, but it's below the night, so that's perfect timing essentially. So as a comparison, if it now has light shining on it, it gains much more. And just as a comparison here, by the way, if you use the best one, you will gain a significant amount. But that's only regarding the light one. This also works with the altar and everything that requires light as energy essentially. The attunement altar is something else. It doesn't work with that, but works generally with tree beacon, ritual pedestal, and in the future, like those kinds of things. That aspect of the mod didn't really get its real attention, or I guess I didn't really, in the last chapter, bring the idea of that across. So I will try to get better with that, and in order to bring this to its actual meaning, I will try to bring all of this much earlier, as I said, in Tier 2. And Tier 3 will most likely get large amounts of the things that I planned for Tier 4. I will not include minor, at the moment it is at least not planned to include the minor constellations into Tier 3. So those are still subject for Tier 4. But I don't know what will change. So at the moment, I will just say that the quote-unquote things I had planned for Tier 4 will most likely end up in Tier 3. There are a bunch of items that will definitely stay in Tier 3. Maybe not the Shifting Star, I don't know yet. There are definitely things that I want to have, that should stay here. But generally, Starlight Network and things are subject to become main focus as of Tier 2. And or late Tier 2, and then get its full attention in Tier 3. Just have the lenses in Tier 2, and then have your own collector crystals and prism and stuff in Tier 3 to have the full focus on Tier 3 and the beginning of that in Tier 2. To kind of accelerate the progression pace of the mod, as well as add I try to shift the attention from progression to actual optional content, which I think will be better if I make progression faster, or try to untie parts of this. And lastly, I do have plans to add 1 extra perk to each major constellation. So Visio, Armora, Dissidia, and Avitus are all gonna get a new higher tier perk. I would say that concludes it that kind of concludes it for this short rundown of things. So if you have feedback regarding this, please tell me. It's always valued very, very highly. And thanks for your time, obviously.